Hello class, now we're going to move on towards your challenges, antagonism, and prejudice and discrimination, which forms part of your module 3 right now. So I hope you're doing well today. And of course, exams is coming near, so we have to speed the pace. So moving on towards our first concept regarding on your module 3, we talk about the definition of your race. So your race refers to socially constructed categories that are based on biological traits the members of a society consider to be important. The cause for racial diversity was the fact that all humans lived in different geographic regions of the world. So class, in simple terms, race is a way that people in a society group themselves based on certain physical characteristics they think are important. These characteristics like skin color or facial features are things that vary among people. So here, the reason we have different racial groups is because long ago, people lived in different parts of the world, and over time, they developed different physical traits because of where they lived. So when we look around today, we see lots of different racial features in people because of the movement of people from one place to another. So it is important for us to remember that race is not something that is determined by our biology or science. It's something that society has created based on these physical differences. Different societies might categorize people into racial groups differently, so what one society considers a particular race might be different from another society's perspective. So moving in the past, some scientists had tried to categorize people into three main racial types based on their physical characteristics. We have our Caucasoids, which are people with lighter skin and fine hair, and that they were often associated with European and Western Asian populations. We have our second one, which is your Mongoloids, where people with yellow or brown skin have distinctive folds on their eyelids. This category was often used for Asian populations, particularly here in China or in Japan. So our third part of the racial discovery of scientists is our Negroids. So people in this category had dark skin and coarse hair. They were typically associated with African populations. Moving on towards our next slide, we now look about the concept of your ethnicity. Well, class, your ethnicity here in your PowerPoint states that ethnicity is a shared cultural heritage and refers to socially constructed categories based on cultural traits a society defines as being important and give its members a distinctive social identity. Ethnicity reflects common ancestors, language, and religion, and that the importance of ethnicity varies from place to place and over time. So, in simple terms, class, your ethnicity is like a special club or group that people join because they share certain cultural things, which of course I have taught you during last week regarding on this concept of your ethnic groups. So, in here, these cultural things can be things like having the same ancestors, speaking the same language, or practicing the same religion. So when you're part of an ethnic group, it means you have a unique social identity because you belong to that group. So, but here, the interesting part is that the importance of this ethnicity can change depending on where you are and what time it is. So in some places and at certain times, people might really celebrate and emphasize their ethnicity, such as your festivals or traditions. So let's say for example, your panagbenga. So, but in other places or times, people might not talk about it much and might even choose to downplay it, which means they don't make a big deal about it. Also, in addition, class, some societies might treat people differently based on their ethnicity, which isn't always a good thing. They might separate or discriminate against people because they come from a different ethnic group. So ethnicity is this idea of your shared culture and identity that can be important in some situations and less important in others, and it can affect how people are treated in society. On to your next slide, we can see that minorities can be based on racial and ethnic differences and have two important characteristics. Our first characteristic is that society gives them a distinctive identity. In here class, minorities are a group of people within a society who stand out because they are different from the majority in some way. This difference could be based on the factors such as their race, their ethnicity, their religion, or culture. So imagine class, a society like a group of colorful marbles with most of them being red. The marbles that are blue or green represent the minorities because their colors make them unique compared towards the majority of red marbles. Our next characteristic is that minorities experience feelings of subordination. Remember that minority often comes with a challenging aspects, which is the feeling of subordination. This means that minority groups can sometimes feel like they are not treated as well as the majority. This unequal treatment can be a result of stereotypes, your prejudices, or biases held by the larger population. It may manifest as limited opportunities, discrimination, or a lack of same respect and rights given towards the majority. So to illustrate it, you have to picture a school playground where most kids love playing a particular game, but a few kids prefer a different one. So if the majority consistently ignores the minority's choice, prevents them from playing their game, or even makes fun of them for it, the minority kids might feel like they're not as important or fairly treated as the others. This analogy reflects the feelings of your subordination that minorities can experience in society. Therefore, it is crucial for societies to work towards fairness and respect for all, regardless of their differences, to ensure that minorities are treated justly and equitably. Moving on towards your next slide, let us now look upon the concept of your prejudice and stereotypes. In here class, it is inputted in your slide that prejudice is a rigid and unfair generalization about a category of people, and that one type of your prejudice is the stereotype, which is a simplified description applied to every person in some category. The social distance scale invented by Bugardos is used to measure prejudice. In here class, your prejudice is when people make up their minds about a whole group of people and treat them unfairly because they think everyone in that group is the same. It's like deciding that all dogs are mean because you met one mean dog even though there are many friendly dogs out there. So here in your stereotype class is a bit like having a quick idea or picture in your head about what all people in a group are like. So based on what you've seen or heard about a few of them. So for example, thinking that all doctors wear white coats and stethoscopes is a stereotype. But it's not always true because some doctors wear different clothes and do different settings. So in here, in simple terms, your prejudice is when people unfairly judge a whole group, and that stereotypes class are simplified ideas about what people in a group are like. And the social distance scale helps us figure out how open or close someone is to being friends with people from different groups. So here, ideally, we want people to have low social distance to promote fairness and understanding among all kinds of people. In your next slide class, it therefore presents that recent research that measured student attitudes confirms that prejudice towards all racial and ethnic categories are declining. And it is presented the patterns of social distance among college students, which are the following. First, we have your student opinion, which shows a trend towards greater social acceptance. We have your second pattern, which people see less difference between minorities. And third, the terrorist attacks of 9/11 may have reduced social acceptance of Arabs and Muslims. So in here class, Recent research on student attitudes reveals a positive trend towards greater social acceptance. This means that students are becoming more open and friendly towards people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. They are showing a willingness to embrace diversity and engage with individuals who may have different cultural experiences. Additionally, class, people are starting to recognize that there are fewer significant differences between various minority groups. This shift suggests that individuals are realizing that despite superficial distinctions, people from diverse backgrounds often share common values, interest, and your aspirations. However, it is important to take note, class, that the research also indicates a potential exception to this trend. So the tragic events of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, which had killed 3,000 Americans, appear to have a negative impact on social acceptance, particularly your Arabs and your Muslims, of course. So these events created a climate of fear and misunderstanding, which may have led to some individuals becoming less open and accepting of people from these specific backgrounds. Overall, the findings highlight both positive progress in fostering social acceptance and the need for continued efforts to address lingering biases and prejudices, particularly in the aftermath of significant events that can influence perceptions and attitudes. In this slide, let us now look upon the concept of your racism, which is a common terminology up until now in our contemporary world. So class, in your slide, racism is a very destructive type of prejudice because it asserts that one race is innately superior or inferior towards another. So your racism has always existed, and although we are making some progress, racism of course remains a serious social problem. So in here class, your racism is a harmful and unfair belief that some people or some group of people are naturally better or worse than others because of their skin color or where they come from. It's like saying that one team in a game is always better than another team because of the color of their uniforms. So in here, your racism has been around for a very, very long time, and even though we are trying to make things better, it's still a big problem in our society. This means that some people are treated badly or unfairly just because of their race, and of course, class, this is not a right thing to do, especially in our world that we are living right now. So we need to keep working together to make sure that everyone is treated with kindness and fairness, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Now let us move on towards your 4 theories of prejudice. Our first theory, class, according to your slide, is your scapegoat theory. Now, your scapegoat theory helps us understand why some people may unfairly blame others, especially those who are less powerful for their own problems. It's a bit like when someone is having a bad day or facing difficulties, and instead of dealing with their issues, they instead choose to point fingers at someone else. This targets often minorities or people with less influence and of course are called your scapegoats. So imagine, class, that you are having a hard time at school or work, and instead of trying to solve your problems, you instead started blaming someone else who had nothing to do with it. That person becomes the scapegoat, someone unfairly blamed for things they didn't cause. This theory helps us see that when people feel frustrated or disadvantaged, they might sometimes look for someone less powerful to blame, even though it's not really their fault. So understanding this theory can help us work towards fairness and not unfairly blame others for our own challenges. The second concept that is presented on your slide is the concept of your authoritarian personality theory, which is a way to understand why some people tend to be very prejudiced. It's like saying that some individuals have a certain type of personality that makes them more likely to be unkind or unfair to others, especially those who are different from them, of course. So in here, class, people with authoritarian personality tend to see things in a very black and white manner, meaning they think something is either completely right or completely wrong. They also believe that society is like a competition, where stronger or better people should control those who are weaker. On the other hand, class, people who are tolerant, which means they are accepting and open-minded towards different kinds of people, tend to be more flexible in their judgments. So here, they treat everyone as equals and are kinder to all people, not just one particular group, of course. So in this theory class, it helps us understand that some individuals might have personalities that make them more prejudiced, while others are more open and accepting of everyone. Moving on towards your third theory as presented in the PowerPoint, let us now talk about your culture theory. So class, your culture theory tells us that some prejudice exists in everyone because it's a part of the culture we grow up and of course learn from. So here, imagine a culture like the ideas and customs that people in your community have. Sometimes these ideas can make us have unfair feelings about people who are different from us. So class, remember that even people from minority groups can sometimes have similar unfair feelings towards others who are not like them. This happens because they might have also learned some of these prejudiced ideas from the culture they live in. So here, the culture theory reminds us that prejudice can exist in all of us because it's something we pick up from the society and culture we're part of. However, it's essential to recognize these biases and work towards treating everyone fairly, no matter where they come from and what they look like. Moving on towards your last theory, which is your conflict theory, class, the conflict theory suggests that prejudice is a tool used by powerful individuals or groups to control and dominate others who are not as powerful. It's like saying some people use unfair ideas about others to keep them down or make them feel less important. So here, even minority groups class that can encourage thinking about race a lot because it can help them gain more power and privileges. They might see themselves as victims who need extra attention and care, and that this strategy might work in the short term to get better treatment. But it can also make some people who don't agree with this approach become upset. So they may feel that giving special treatment based on race or ethnicity is not fair. So in simple terms, class, conflict theory tells us that prejudice can be used as a way for powerful people or groups to control others, and that sometimes even minority groups might use this idea of being victims to gain advantages. However, this can also lead to disagreements because some people don't like the idea of special treatment based on race or ethnicity. In this slide, let us now look upon the concept of your discrimination. In here, class, discrimination is treating various categories of people unequally, which is therefore portrayed in your slide. Now, class, discrimination is when people act on those unfair thoughts and feelings by treating certain groups of people unfairly or differently. It's like actually doing something that's not fair to someone because of how you feel about their group. So put it simply, class, prejudice is about how you think and feel, while discrimination is about how you act towards others based on those thoughts and feelings. Both are not good because they can lead to unfair treatment of people who deserve to be treated equally. Now, under the patterns of your interaction between majority and minority, let us first look about the concept of your pluralism. So, pluralism, class, is a concept that describes a society where different racial and ethnic groups, even though they are distinct or different from each other, are seen as having about the same level of importance and respect. It's like saying that in a pluralistic society, all people, no matter where they come from or what they look like, are considered equal and should be treated the same way under the law. So class, imagine a big puzzle with different pieces, each representing a different group of people. So in a pluralistic society, all those pieces are equally important and they fit together to create a complete picture without one piece being more valuable than the others. So it's all about fairness, equality, and everyone having the same rights and opportunities regardless of their race or ethnicity. Our second pattern is the concept of your assimilation. Class, your assimilation is like a process where people from one group gradually start to adopt the customs, languages, the clothings, and even the way of thinking of another group that is more dominant or common in a particular place. It's like when someone new in a neighborhood or country tries to become more like the people who have been there for a long time. So let us say, for example, if someone moves to a new country, they might start speaking the local language, or that they would wear similar clothes, and of course, maybe following the customs of the people in that country. So they might even change their religious beliefs and values to match those of the dominant culture. So in here, class, people do this because it can help protect them from unfair treatment or prejudice by fitting in better. It's like a way to climb the social ladder, meaning they have a better chance of moving up in society and having more opportunities. But what is important to know is that not everyone assimilates to the same extent, and some groups of people do it more than others. So in different societies, you'll find varying levels of assimilation depending on the category or group of people and how much they want to adopt towards the dominant culture. Moving on to the concept of your segregation, segregation means that different groups of people are separated from each other, either physically or socially, and that sometimes people from minority groups might choose to separate themselves. But most of the time, it's like the majority group that excludes or forces minority groups to separate from them. And finally, class, we have the concept of your genocide, in which this concept or this practice is a very serious and tragic event where one group of people tries to systematically kill another group of people simply because they belong to that group. It's like when some people from one group decide to harm, hurt, or even kill people from another group just because of who they are. For example, class, in history, there have been instances where Europeans came into contact with the original inhabitants of America, and there were cases of genocide where many people from the original population were systematically killed. So one of the most well-known examples of genocide happened during World War II, when a leader named Adolf Hitler ordered the killing of millions of Jewish people in concentration camps, of course, which are Jews, and that sadly, even today, there are still ongoing conflict between Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda. By the way, Hutus and Tutsis are tribes, but they have different groups. So in here, there are large number of people that have been killed simply because they belong to one of these two groups. So in simple terms, class, genocide is a terrible act where one group of people tries to wipe out another group by killing them just because they are different. It's a very sad and tragic part of human history, of course, class. I mean, it's so sad, and it's important for the world to work together to prevent such atrocities from happening. This is all for our lesson regarding on your Module 3. Thank you, class. Take care, Alwad, and see you next lesson.